You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Sports fans, welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. Before I get into anything, I want to say this. And I mentioned this at the end of yesterday's New York Jets show, but if you didn't listen to it, I'll repeat what I said. I'm not going to talk about the New York Islanders on this show. I'm going to talk about it tonight. At the end of the day, I had the New York Islanders show previously scheduled before we knew that the games would be called. So if I'm going to do an Islanders show anyway, let me save all the Islanders news for that show. I don't want to double dip on the Islanders. There's a lot to talk about today, excluding the Islanders. I want to keep all the Islanders stuff in one show. You'll get that tonight. I hope that makes sense. Let me start with football. Specifically, Steelers Bengals. A Bengals team that had some people concerned recently. They were 5-4 as of 10 days ago. They had lost 2 straight to the Jets and Browns. They lost to Mike White, and they got creamed by the Browns in Cincinnati. There were people writing off the Bengals. Then they go into Las Vegas and beat a slumping Raiders team. I don't think anyone was overly impressed by that win. I know there were a lot of people still doubting the Bengals. Like we were too quick to anoint them as a good team. It's still the same old Bungles. You can't say that after what they did yesterday. Look, the Steelers aren't a great team. I mean, I've been down on them for a while. I don't think anyone who watches them sees a great team. I think we see a team that needs to blow things up. Prepare for the next era of Steelers football. But to win 41-10, to be up 31-3 at the half, to make Ben Roethlisberger look as bad as he looked, to make Najee Harris look as bad as he looked, that's impressive. I mean, that's a great job by the Bengals. I mean, Joe Burrow had a really good game. Joe Mixon was insane. Averaged almost 6 yards a carry. Had 165 rushing yards. Had 2 touchdowns. T. Higgins had 6 catches for 114 yards and a touchdown. This Bengals team is for real. They are a really good team. Are they going to make a lot of noise in the playoffs? Depends on who they go up against. If they go up against the Patriots, I could see it. If they go up against the Titans, I could see it. If the season ends today, they're going up against the Chiefs. That's tough. The Chiefs seem to be rounding into form. They've won 4 straight. It's tough for me to picture the Bengals winning that game. But against the Patriots, I understand that the Patriots are playing great right now. Alright. And it ticks me off to no end that the Patriots are playing well. There is no good reason for the Patriots to be playing well. Alright, you look at that roster, it's not better than the Bills. It's not better than the Chargers. It's not better than the Raiders. It's not better than the Browns. But freaking Belichick, of course, with a rookie quarterback, is going to make the playoffs. Is he going to win the AFC East? I don't know. I'll say this. Monday Night Football, a week from today, is Patriots-Bills in Buffalo. 3 weeks after that, they meet in Foxborough. Those games are going to go a long way toward deciding who wins the AFC East. But the point is, I'm not 100% sold on the Patriots. Alright, it's very tough to be sold on a quarterback who just dinks and dunks like Mac Jones does. It's very tough to be sold on a team with a suspect roster, even if they have a great coach. Bengals Patriots in the playoffs, I could see the Bengals winning that game. I'll take Joe Burrow over Mac Jones. I'll take Joe Mixon over Damian Harris. I'll take the Bengals wide receivers over the Patriots wide receivers. The Bengals could easily beat the Patriots, and they could beat the Titans. Without Derrick Henry, the Titans are slipping. Any team that goes up against the Titans without Henry has a great chance of winning. I mean, next week is their bye week. The week after, they're facing the Jaguars in Tennessee. You can't tell me that the Jaguars don't have a chance to win that game. The Titans really don't look that good right now. Any team in the NFL has a chance to beat them, even a team as bad as the Jaguars. I mean, if the Bengals go up against the Titans, we could be looking at another Bengals-Steelers game. Even Bengals-Chiefs. Can you really tell me that the Chiefs are gonna win that game 100%? Look, I'll pick the Chiefs in that game. But I think the Bengals have a chance. The Bengals do have a good defense. And Patrick Mahomes looks human this year. Not saying he's bad. Not saying the Chiefs should move on from him. I'm just saying he's not putting up the video game numbers that we've gotten used to from him. But let me tell you, that Bengals offense could run roughshod over the Chiefs' defense. I understand that the Chiefs really limited what the Cowboys could do last week, but do we really see the Chiefs' defense doing that again? You want to tell me they're rounding into form? Yeah. Okay, I'll give you that. I'll give you that their last 3 wins have been really impressive. Their win against the Giants was not impressive, okay? You have to kick a field goal with just over a minute left to beat the Giants. That's not impressive. I mean, this is a team that was getting torched early in the season. Now they seem to be rounding into form, there's no question. But is that sustainable? Who are the real Chiefs? Is it the team that we saw early in the season or the team we're seeing now? I don't think you can be 100% confident in the Chiefs. Make no mistake about it. The Cincinnati Bengals have a chance to make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. Their last playoff win came over a team that doesn't exist anymore. The Houston Oilers. The Bengals destroyed the Oilers 41-14. You know who the quarterback was for the Bengals in that game? Boomer Esiason. All due respect to Boomer, but if he's the last quarterback to win a playoff game for your franchise, that's one sorry franchise. This guy's been out of the league since '97. If Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor could end that streak, it wouldn't matter if they lost 50-0 the week after. They'd be set in Cincy for life. I really think that this core that the Bengals have is capable of doing special things. Not saying they're going to win the Super Bowl or anything. I'm just saying I think they have a chance to make some noise in the playoffs. Moving on now to Panthers-Dolphins. The third game of the second Cam Newton era. Or second, depending on how you look at it. I mean, Newton didn't start his first game. PJ Walker did. But Newton got in. Scored a touchdown. Threw another touchdown. Nice homecoming. Then plays great against Washington. Panthers should have won that game. Their defense just collapsed late, allowing 2 late Washington field goals. Then they travel to Miami. And look, I understand that the Dolphins right now are actually in the playoff mix. As crazy as that sounds, they are 5-7. They've won 4 straight. They need a lot of things to go right for them to make the playoffs, but they are in the mix. Maybe they're on the way outside looking in, but they are looking in with a chance. A 0.0001% chance, but still, they're there. Better than the Jets. But even then, I don't think anyone looks at the Dolphins and sees a great team. This is a game that you thought the Panthers really had a chance in. In my offline pool, I picked the Panthers. It went about as poorly for Carolina as it possibly could. You've got the defense looking atrocious. Tua Tagovailoa only had 4 incompletions. The guy threw for 230 yards. Jalen Waddle had 9 catches for 137 yards and a touchdown. Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. X-rays were negative, but the guy only had 10 carries for 35 yards. He didn't have a single catch. And to make matters worse, Cam Newton was so bad. He completed just 5 of his 21 passes for 92 yards. He got picked off twice, that he was benched. P.J. Walker came in and looked just as bad. Completed 5 of 10 passes for 87 yards, threw an interception, and was sacked 4 times. Here's the thing. And the sooner we come to this realization as football fans, the better. Matt Rule and Joe Brady are inept. They are just outmatched in the pros. They are the latest in a long line of college coaches to fail in the pros. You want to tell me it's too early to say that? No, it's not. How many quarterbacks are they going to get a chance with before we realize they're inept? Teddy Bridgewater looks miles better with the Broncos than he did with the Panthers. Sam Darnold was seemingly putting it all together early in the season. Through his first 4 games, he had completed just under 68% of his passes for just under 1,200 yards. Had thrown 5 touchdowns, had ran for 5 more, had thrown 3 picks, but it seemed like he was putting it all together. His last 5 games, he looked abysmal. Completed just under 52% of his passes for just under 800 yards. Only 2 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. And some of those interceptions, you're just shaking your head like, what on earth are you doing, my guy? You wouldn't even make those throws in Madden. The fact that a quarterback, even one as bad as Darnold, can fall off that steeply, that quickly, is a terrible look for the coaching staff. And P.J. Walker takes way too many sacks. Cam Newton can't have that type of a game. Christian McCaffrey getting hurt can't affect the Panthers that much. Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. That's what he does. He's a great player when healthy. Okay? Easily one of the best players in the NFL when healthy. But the guy is made of glass. Only 10 games in the past 2 seasons. You want to tell me he was an Iron Man early in his career? Fine. His first 3 seasons, he played in every game. Totally get that. Irrelevant now. To have only played 10 games in your last 2 seasons, counting this one, is inexcusable. You've got to prepare for that as a coaching staff. That something's going to happen to McCaffrey, and we're not going to let it affect us. The Jets, the freaking Jets, were without their best running back. They found a way to win. Not for nothing, but if Matt Rule and Joe Brady are really offensive geniuses, they would have found a way to win. That loss yesterday isn't on Newton. It's not on Phil Snow. I'm not saying that Phil Snow and his defense had a good game. They didn't. But this loss is so much more on Rule and Brady, it's not even funny. Alright. I've heard people say that you need more than 2 years to evaluate a coach. In a perfect world, everyone would get 3. I mean, tell that to all the Jets fans that have nothing but bad things to say about Adam Gase, right? Should he have gotten a 3rd year? See, I don't think there's a clear demarcation line. I think when it's clear you're overmatched as a head coach, and in the case of Rule, you don't know how to evaluate talent, it's time for a change. I mean, David Tepper gave Rule a huge contract. He said, here are the keys to the kingdom, deliver us a Super Bowl. Signs Teddy Bridgewater to a big deal in free agency, gives up on him after a year, gives up a pretty big haul for Sam Darnold. A second, a fourth, and a sixth for a guy that the Jets were desperate to get rid of. And he looks absolutely inept. Cam Newton looked infinitely worse than he ever did with the Patriots yesterday. This vaunted offense is averaging less than 20 points per game. It's the 23rd best mark in the league. You know how many points they averaged last year? 21.9. The 24th best mark in the league. Don't give me this garbage that they had 4 players with over 1,000 scrimmage yards. It means nothing. They went 5-11. If you're only scoring 21 points per game, that's not enough. You're basically in the bottom quarter of the league. You're an offensive guru? Both of these idiots are supposedly offensive gurus? The Jets wanted Rule desperately. They were prepared to offer him a ton of money to leave Baylor. And Rule said no, supposedly because the Jets wanted to dictate who his coordinators would be, who his positional coaches would be. So Rule said no, I'll stay in Baylor. The Jets knew what they were doing. They didn't trust Rule. They should have never been linked to him, but they were right to not trust him. The Giants? The Giants were prepared to offer the moon and the stars for him. Instead, the Panthers swoop in. Let me tell you, both New York teams dodged a bullet. You've heard the saying, sometimes the best trades are the ones you don't make. Like Mariano Rivera for Felix Fermin. George Steinbrenner wanting to trade Bernie Williams early in his career. Robinson Cano nearly being traded for Alex Rodriguez. Sometimes the best hires are the ones you don't make. I mean, the Jets got it wrong with Gase, and the Giants got it wrong with Judge. But they'd be in an infinitely worse spot with Matt Rule at the helm. The Panthers are stuck with Rule. Alright, even though it's clear to me that this guy is nothing short of inept in the pros. And Joe Brady, too. I'll get into him in a minute, but Rule's the head coach. This guy signed a 7-year deal with the Panthers worth $62 million. That's just under $9 million a year. You're not going to get rid of a guy who you still owe over $40 million to. Even though it should be clear to every Panthers fan and every NFL fan, including David Tepper, that he made a terrible mistake. You know what I think we've really learned? That college coaches just don't work in the pros. I understand Pete Carroll. I understand Jimmy Johnson. I understand Bill O'Brien. If you take the personnel decisions out of the equation and you just look at the head coaching record, he had a good run with the Texans. I get all that. Barry Switzer, too. He does have a Super Bowl. Granted, with Jimmy Johnson's guys, but still, he has a ring. The thing is, though, those are the exceptions that prove the rule. Chip Kelly, Nick Saban, Steve Spurrier, Lou Holtz, Bud Wilkinson, Bobby Petrino. The list goes on and on and on. Some people would put Urban Meyer on that list right now. I mean, I'm not going to go as far as to say that Meyer's on that list, but Rule is. This guy is clueless. And Joe Brady is too. The fact that he was getting head coaching interviews drove me nuts. The only thing that this guy should be interviewed for is dog catcher. Not for nothing, but this guy rides Ed Orgeron's, Joe Burrow's, and Steve Ensminger's coattails to being called the next great offensive mind. He goes to the NFL despite having very limited play calling experience. He's calling the plays. He looks just as bad as Rule. Look, I understand that the Panthers aren't going to move on from Rule. Okay, totally get that. But you've got to move on from Brady. Alright, not for nothing, but you actually have a little bit of a chance to make the playoffs. You're only a half game behind the Vikings. Granted, you've got some teams to leapfrog. But the Falcons aren't that good. The Saints aren't that good. I don't know who the Eagles are. I don't think they're that great. I don't think they're terrible. They're an infuriating team, I'll tell you that. The Panthers actually have a chance to sneak into the playoffs. But we're nearing the point of no return. And if you want to make the playoffs and make people forget about your terrible quarterback management if you're Matt Rule, and you want to prove the owner right, David Tepper, in giving you this much power and that big of a contract, you've got to fire Brady. It's just that simple. You've got to make a change. I mean, that's clear as day. You've got to hold someone responsible for this offensive ineptitude. If you're not going to hold Rule responsible, you've got to hold Brady responsible. Fire him now. I mean, I'll tell you who would be interesting to promote to offensive coordinator. And I understand that you're not going to know this name. I'll tell you who he is in a second. Brian Angelico. This guy's been a tight ends coach in the NFL since 2012. Bounced around a lot of teams. The Buccaneers, the Browns, the Packers, the Redskins. Now he's with the Panthers. I mean, this guy seems to have paid his dues. It's clear that teams think highly of him, that people think highly of him, because he keeps getting jobs. Why not give him a chance? You want to tell me Sean Ryan, the Panthers quarterback's coach, should get a chance? No. What have the quarterbacks done to warrant the quarterback's coach getting the offensive coordinator job? The running backs coach, Jeff Nixon? Maybe? I feel like I'd rather go with Angelico. I want someone outside of the Rule sphere of influence. Alright, if I'm saying that Matt Rule is a bad coach, why would I want to promote someone who comes from the Rule coaching tree? I don't want Nixon. I don't want the wide receivers coach, Frisman Jackson, even though he's a former Jet. Pat Meyer, the offensive line coach, doesn't have a ton of experience. Give it to someone with experience. Brian Angelico, the tight ends coach. I think it makes sense. Alright, now I'll give you some college football Valk talk. And there are a lot of things to discuss. We almost had Armageddon in the CFP. Michigan had already beaten OSU, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Alabama was this close to losing to Auburn in the Iron Bowl. I mean, they were painfully close to losing that game. I understand that rivalry games always have a chance for an upset, but I really wasn't that impressed with Auburn this year. I thought Bama would go into Auburn and steamroll the Tigers. Instead, they need a last-minute touchdown to send the game to overtime. Then they need 4 overtimes just to win the damn thing. The CFP committee almost had Armageddon. Seriously. You put Michigan in. That's no problem. Then who do you put in over Bama? Does Notre Dame get in? Does Oklahoma State get in? I mean, here's the thing. Oklahoma State should have beaten Oklahoma a lot easier than they did in Bedlam. I mean, I did say the Cowboys would win that game, but boy, the Sooners gave them a run for their money. Like I said, rivalry games. I mean, it's one thing to have a CFP without OSU. But to have one without OSU and Alabama, oh my gosh. Don't tell me that it's not the committee's job to care about ratings. Maybe it's not, but I'll tell you, they do. They want as many big schools in as possible. So who gets in? Notre Dame? A school that would get eyeballs from all across the country? Or Oklahoma State, a team that you probably don't know too much about unless you're a big college football fan? The answer should be Oklahoma State because there's no way that the Cowboys are worse than the Fighting Irish, but something tells me the committee would put in the Fighting Irish over the Cowboys. Fortunately, they don't need to make that decision yet. Bama won. Oklahoma State won. Alright, but you know what the top 4 is going to be. Georgia's going to be 1. Either Bama or Michigan will be 2. I think you've got to put Michigan 2 after they beat OSU pretty easily. And Bama had such a hard time with a bad Auburn team. I think you've got to put Michigan 2. I'm not saying that it was a cakewalk for the Wolverines. It wasn't, but it wasn't the dogfight that the Iron Bowl or Bedlam was. So I'd put Michigan 2, Bama 3, Cincinnati 4. If you want to flip-flop Michigan and Alabama, I could understand it. I'm not going to go crazy about that. Here's the thing, though. While the committee dodged Armageddon for now, they can still have it. I still think Georgia's beating Alabama in the SEC title game. Nothing that happened on Saturday convinced me otherwise. In fact, it just made me more confident in the Bulldogs. The game is in Atlanta. Georgia looks like the superior team by far. It's not even close. I really think they're winning that game. So Bama falls out. Who comes in? Notre Dame or Oklahoma State? The answer should be Oklahoma State. But if Baylor beats them in the Big 12 title game, and that game is in Arlington, and Baylor's not a bad team this year. We haven't talked about them a lot, but Baylor's not bad. It's another knock on Matt Rule. People said, oh, look how bad Baylor is without Rule. They're a top 10 team this year. I mean, let's say Baylor wins. Does a 2-loss Baylor team get in? You can make the argument for it. You can make the argument that a 2-loss Baylor team that won the Big 12 title deserves to get in over a 2-loss Bama team that lost the SEC title. Does Notre Dame get in? Notre Dame will only have 1 loss. What about if Iowa beats Michigan in the Big 10 title game? Everyone took it for granted that OSU would win. I mean, no one was giving the Hawkeyes a chance against the Buckeyes. And they were right to not do that because the Buckeyes would destroy the Hawkeyes. Michigan, Iowa? That's a little closer. How does Michigan beat you? They beat you by running the ball down your throat. Iowa has an excellent rush defense. Make no mistake about it. Iowa could win that game. So we could have Armageddon in the CFP. We could have 2-loss teams vying with 1-loss teams. Conference winners vying with conference losers. There could be absolute madness. Here's what's for sure. Georgia's in. Even if they lose to Alabama, Georgia's in. If Alabama beats Georgia, obviously they're in. I'd like to say that Cincinnati's definitely in. I don't think the committee sees it that way. I think a loss to Houston would knock them out. I mean, there really is a chance that we have 3 open spots. Houston could beat Cincy. Houston's not a bad team this year. I don't see it happening, but Houston's 11-1. Their quarterback, Clayton Tune, is having a really good year. Nathaniel Dell is a very talented wide receiver. Alton McCaskill's a really good running back. I could see Houston keeping up with Cincinnati in a shootout. Sadly, there's no chance Houston would get in, even if they beat Cincy in the AAC. Obviously, UTSA is out of the equation. The only chance they had was going undefeated. They got upset last week by North Texas. So they're out of the mix. So let's say Houston pulls off the upset. Let's say Iowa pulls off the upset. And the most likely one, Georgia beating Alabama. Then you'd have absolute madness. I mean, you would have chaos. The winner of the Big 12 championship gets in, whether it's Baylor or Oklahoma State. Could be Baylor, but, But I think I will pick Oklahoma State in that game. Notre Dame probably gets in. Let me ask you something. Does OSU sneak in that scenario? We've seen that before. Teams out of conference championship games sneak into the CFP. It happened with Alabama during the Tua game, where he came in relief of Jalen Hurts and led the miraculous comeback. Would you put in a team like Ole Miss that just won the Egg Bowl? These may seem like crazy scenarios, but I could see a world where it happens. Yes, the committee avoided Armageddon for now, but it can still happen. Alright, yes, there would need to be upsets galore. I mean, Houston beating Cincinnati is pretty far-fetched. Iowa beating Michigan, I don't think is out of the realm of possibility. But I don't think anyone looks at those two teams and says that Iowa's better. Georgia, I think, will beat Alabama, so we will have one open spot. The thing is, though, that is probably going to go to the winner of the Big 12 title game. Then again, would the committee put in Notre Dame before they put in a team like Oklahoma State or Baylor? At this very moment, they have Notre Dame ranked ahead of Oklahoma State and Baylor. I have no idea what the rankings are going to look like when they come out this week. You've got to think that Oklahoma State would be ahead of Notre Dame. Would Baylor be ahead? I don't know. They had a tough time against Texas Tech. There are a lot of crazy scenarios that can happen. We're entering conference championship week, and we have very little clarity. The only thing we know for sure is that Georgia's getting in. Alright, if you're a Bulldogs fan, you've got to be very happy right now. Here's what I think will happen, just to give a little bit of clarity. Oklahoma State, I think, will beat Baylor. I think they are the better team. It wouldn't stun me if Baylor won, but I am going to pick Oklahoma State. These two teams went at it earlier in the year. It was in Stillwater. The Cowboys won 24-14. Granted, this game is in Arlington. It's probably going to be a pro-Baylor crowd. But I still think Oklahoma State will win. I think Georgia will beat Alabama. So that opens up the spot for Oklahoma State. I think Cincinnati will beat Houston. So they're in. And I think Michigan will beat Iowa, so they're in. So I think the CFP will consist of some combination of Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, and Oklahoma State. The TV people will not like that because you're not going to have a ton of eyes on those games unless you're a big college football fan. I mean, I don't see Notre Dame getting in over Oklahoma State if Oklahoma State beats Baylor. If Baylor beats Oklahoma State, I could see Notre Dame getting in. That would be unfair to some people. I totally get it. But sadly, I'd understand the logic from a TV perspective. And at the end of the day, Notre Dame would have the better record. But again, I think Oklahoma State will beat Baylor. It's not an ironclad prediction, but I do think it'll happen. So I really think we're going to get Georgia, Cincinnati, Michigan, Oklahoma State. Some combination of those four. You know what, though? That may not even be the most pressing concern to college football fans. the chaos with the CFP. The biggest story is probably Lincoln Riley leaving Oklahoma for USC. If you are a Sooners fan, you have every right to be furious with Lincoln Riley. This guy was linked to NFL jobs, maybe not on a serious level, but certainly he was in the mix. Supposedly he never entertained the thought of leaving Oklahoma. He was linked to LSU. He turned that down. Now to leave for USC. Oh, that's tough. For Lincoln Riley's sake, I hope USC never plays Oklahoma in Norman, because he will get booed up the wazoo. I mean, usually I don't like it when fans get upset at their coaches for leaving. Like, Cincinnati fans were really upset at Brian Kelly leaving for Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a better school than Cincinnati. Maybe he didn't handle it the best way, but you can't begrudge him for leaving the Bearcats for the Fighting Irish. Come on. That is a more prestigious job. I mean, my father hates James Franklin for leaving Vanderbilt for Penn State. Again, I get it. It's tough to see your coach say, this team is better, this school is better, this opportunity is better, so I'm going to go there and leave you guys in the lurch. But I'm sorry, Dad, Penn State is a more appealing football school than Vanderbilt is. It just is. The thing is, though, Oklahoma fans have every right to be upset with Lincoln Riley. Is USC really that much more prestigious than Oklahoma? I don't think so. The Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush years are a distant memory. I mean, let me tell you, the Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, and Clay Helton years are fresher in my mind than the Pete Carroll years. No one's going to mistake Kiffin, Sarkisian, and Helton for Howard Jones anytime soon. USC has really fallen on hard times. Now, did they make Lincoln Riley the proverbial offer he couldn't refuse? Yeah, they probably did. I mean, I haven't seen what Riley's new contract is going to be. What I can tell you is that Riley made just over $8 million last year for the Sooners. So if next year for the Sooners he was going to make in that range, to even entertain the possibility of leaving, he has to be getting what, 9 mil, 10 mil, something like that? I mean, here's something to consider. California has much higher taxes than Oklahoma. I don't know how much Riley's going to need to make with USC to break even with his previous contract, but it's probably a lot more than we think it is. I'm not an accountant. I can't do that math. So the money reason doesn't work. The prestigious program argument doesn't work. There's no good reason for Riley to be leaving. Now, there was a report that would infuriate me even more than I'd already be infuriated if I was a Sooners fan. there was a report that came out that said that Riley didn't want to coach in the SEC. He didn't want to have to go up against teams like Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Arkansas, etc., etc. If that is true, shame on Lincoln Riley for leaving for an inferior conference. There's no question that the Pac-12 is easier than the SEC. Alright, the SEC is the best conference in college football. It's been that way for a long time. I mean, there is a real chance that with Lincoln Riley at the helm, and Spencer Rattler probably joining him, because Rattler entered the transfer portal, you gotta think he's eyeing USC, that USC could go on a run of dominance that rivals what Carroll did. Maybe not undefeated seasons, maybe not national titles, but the best football that the Trojans have seen in a really long time. Who's the only team that scares you in the Pac-12 if you're Lincoln Riley? Oregon. That's not a deterrent for me. Here's the thing, though. Lincoln Riley's saying he didn't want to coach in the SEC, so he's going to go to the Pac-12. Would be the equivalent of Robert Saleh saying to Joe Douglas, I don't want to have to face Josh Allen and Bill Belichick for the next however many years. When the Giants look for a new head coach, it would be the equivalent of the top choice saying, I don't think you're better than the Cowboys long term. I don't think you're better than the Eagles long term. So I'm passing. If the Seahawks move on from Pete Carroll, if they decide to blow things up, it would be the equivalent of the top choice saying, I don't think you're going to be any good, so I'm going to pass. Well, wait a second. You know, how do you say that to a fan base? How do you say that to players? Look, I understand that every coach wants to go into an opportunity where they can win every year. I mean, we've heard the rumors that Oklahoma wants Cliff Kingsbury to replace Riley. There would be coaches lining up from Phoenix to Tucson to get the Cardinals job. If for whatever reason Andy Reid decided to walk away from the Chiefs, and I'm not saying he will, I'm just saying if he did, there would be coaches lining up around the world and back again to coach Patrick Mahomes. If Sean McDermott left the Bills, the line would extend into Canada all the way down to Nova Scotia. I understand that. The thing is, though, those jobs don't become available. Alright? There's nothing wrong with wanting a great opportunity, but you've got to use your noodle. I mean, it's not something that happens incredibly often. So you have to take a less than desirable job. I mean, no one looked at the Jets job and saw a great opportunity. Robert Saleh's going to have an under 500 record on his ledger. You think he wants that? No. Same thing with a guy like Dan Campbell. Same thing with a guy like Urban Meyer. Same thing with a guy like David Culley. But you know what? The best coaches aren't the ones that lead great rosters to victory. I brought up Barry Switzer earlier in the show. No one gives him credit for his Super Bowl. I think I'm the only person to ever defend Barry Switzer. Not saying he did a great job with the Cowboys. He didn't. But he did win a Super Bowl. He had Jimmy Johnson's guys, he had a great roster, and he led it to a Super Bowl. Good for him, but he's never getting into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You know what coaches do get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame? The coaches that lead the not elite rosters to prominence. Was there ever a year where the New England Patriots had the best roster in the NFL? The answer is no. Yet Bill Belichick won 6 Super Bowls. It's why he's the GOAT. Has Matt LaFleur gotten any credit for leading the Packers to back-to-back NFC title games? No, because he has Aaron Rodgers. You know who got credit? Ron Rivera. For going through 4 quarterbacks. Taylor Heineke, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, and Kyle Allen. But somehow, some way, figuring out how to win the NFC East. Granted, best of the worst, but still, they won the division. And nearly beating Tom Brady in the playoffs. Sean Payton got a ton of credit for taking the ghost of Drew Brees into the playoffs, beating the Bears, and nearly beating the Buccaneers. The idea that a coach would shy away from adversity, that would shy away from a challenge, is just despicable. What's the saying? When the going gets tough, you run away and hide? No! You get going. You build Oklahoma into an SEC powerhouse. Come on, have a little confidence in yourself. You're talked about as this great offensive whiz kid. You can turn any quarterback into a Heisman contender. Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and Caleb Williams. Makes me call into question how good you really are. If you don't think that you can win in the SEC, how good are you? This guy should never get an NFL chance. Never. If he doesn't think he can make it in the SEC, why should anyone think he can make it in the NFL? If he doesn't have confidence in himself, why should anyone have confidence in him? I feel for you, Sooners fans. You guys are fantastic fans. Some of the best fans in the nation. Boomer Sooner. And this guy's leaving you for USC. Look, he'll do great things in USC. There's no question. There's no question that USC has what it takes to run the Pac-12 for the next decade. But what we're learning is this. Lincoln Riley may be a really good coach. I don't think he's a great coach. Great coaches dominate tough competition. Nick Saban's great because he dominates tough competition. Dabo Swinney's great because he dominated tough competition. Kirby Smart's 1 win away from an undefeated season as an SEC team. It doesn't get much better than that. I don't care if he loses in the CFP. To go undefeated as an SEC team in the regular season, you become a great coach when you do that. Lincoln Riley's not great. Lincoln Riley's very good. We can never use the word great to describe him. I'm appalled by this. This is disgusting. Alright, sadly now I'll give you some MLB Vault talk. There are about 75 million things I'd rather do than sing the Mets' praises, but you have to if you're a baseball fan. There is no way that you can look at what the Mets did and find anything wrong with it. And if you do, you're an idiot. Okay, it's just that simple. Somehow, some way, Steve Cohen, in the midst of all the tweeting about Steven Matz, doing things that should have burned any bridge that he had with agents in Major League Baseball, found a way to sign two of the biggest free agents on the market in Starling Marte and Max Scherzer. What if the Mets needed, for years, a center fielder? Uncle Stevie goes out and signs the best center fielder in free agency. What if the Mets needed for a while another top-of-the-rotation starter? Look, Marcus Stroman did not have a bad year last year. And I like Tyler McGill. Rich Hill did what you wanted. But if the Mets were really ever going to make noise, they needed another horse alongside DeGrom. They got the best starting pitcher on the market, as far as I'm concerned. A guy who I wanted the Yankees to get. A future Hall of Famer. One of the best pitchers in baseball. Max freaking Scherzer. How do you not look at this and tip your cap at the Mets? These are both fantastic moves. These are moves that instantly make the Mets not just a playoff team, but a World Series contender. One thing that the Mets have lacked for a long time is a true leadoff hitter. They've tried Brandon Nimmo there. And while Nimmo gets on base a lot, you want your leadoff guy to create havoc on the base paths. To steal bases, go from first to third on singles, score from second on singles. Nimmo's not that guy. Good player. I like Nimmo. I think he's gotten a bad rap for a while. But he's not a leadoff hitter. Starling Marte is. Starling Marte led the majors in steals last year with 47. He hit .310 last year. He's one of the most underrated players in baseball. The Yankees were linked to him, and for good reason. I would have loved Marte on the Yankees. This guy's a Gold Glover. This guy always hits for a high average. Drives pitchers nuts when he's on base. Marte's a really good player. But to add Scherzer, to add Max Scherzer, is not just the cherry on top, it's the cherry, the whipped cream, the chopped nuts, whatever toppings you like on Sundays. You don't need me to sing Max Scherzer's praises. You know how great he is. You know that I wanted him on the Yankees. I don't care how old he is. He's still great. This guy's 37 years old and had one of the best seasons of his career. He went 15-4 with a 2.46 ERA. The best ERA he's ever had in the majors. He threw just under 180 innings, had over 230 strikeouts, went undefeated with the Dodgers, and is a great playoff pitcher. Jacob deGrom has not proven that he is a great playoff pitcher. Partially because he hasn't been there in a while. But the last time he took the mound in a playoff game was Game 2 of the 2015 World Series. He went 5 innings and gave up 4 runs. Was great before that. But that's the last time deGrom was on the mound in the playoffs. Are we sure that deGrom is going to be great in the playoffs like he is in the regular season? I'm not. I am confident in Max Scherzer's ability to pitch in the playoffs. He's done it time and time again. This guy can even come out of the bullpen and close out games. Is there anything he can't do? You know, Steve Cohen has done a lot of things wrong as Mets owner. But one thing that he's done is he has put the Mets on an even keel with the Yankees. The New York Yankees are not the undisputed kings of New York. It doesn't matter what the Yankees do from here. Doesn't matter if they sign Correa. Doesn't matter if they trade for Brian Reynolds or Cedric Mullins. Doesn't matter if they sign Clayton Kershaw. Steve Cohen has proven that he will spend whatever he needs to make the Mets competitive. Hal Steinbrenner has proven the exact opposite. I mean, here's the scary thing. Steve Cohen is more like George Steinbrenner than George's son is like him. If that doesn't drive you nuts as a Yankees fan, I don't know what will. If the New York Mets, having a higher payroll than the Yankees, signing superstars, trading for superstars, doing whatever it takes to win, while your team does nothing, just twiddles its thumbs, if that doesn't infuriate you, I don't know what will. One of the biggest moves the Yankees have made this offseason, getting rid of Clint Frazier, Rougned Odor, and Tyler Wade. While the Yankees are subtracting, the Mets are adding. The New York Yankees are not the kings of New York. It's the freaking Mets. And don't give me this garbage that the Mets did this last year by trading for Lindor and Carrasco, signing McCann, signing Walker, and look where it got him. You know where it got him? The same place as the Yankees. The New York Yankees were no better than the New York Mets last year. You want to tell me the Yankees were in the playoffs? Fine. What did they do? They lost. Both the Yankees and Mets didn't win a game in the playoffs. Their ace gets shellacked. Their best player gets thrown out at home by a million miles, and I'm supposed to hang my hat on that? I'm supposed to like the fact that an inept manager is coming back? The Mets had the sense to fire their inept manager. You know what the Yankees said? Come on down. You're the next Frank Howard. The Mets are turning into the Yankees, and the Yankees are turning into the Mets. Steve Cohen is not okay with losing. So he will go out and do whatever he needs to do to put out a winning roster. Hal Steinbrenner is okay with losing. The guy doesn't care. Hal Steinbrenner doesn't care about winning World Series, okay? The man just doesn't. When Hal gets up to those pearly gates, George will be right there to greet him. You know what he's going to do? Instead of giving him a hug, he's going to slap him across the face and say, "Damn you! Damn you for turning my team into the second-class team of New York. I gave you the keys to the kingdom and you couldn't find the lock." The only thing the Yankees fans can do is just tip their cap to the Mets. And hope and pray that after the lockout, which you know is going to come, Brian Cashman will put the pedal to the metal and drastically improve this team. Until then, I'm going to be skeptical. You know why? Because the Yankees have given me no reason to have faith in them in my lifetime. There has never been a darker period to be a Yankees fan. I'm trying to find a light at the end of the tunnel. I don't see it. This is a great day for the Mets. They're the Kings of New York. Moving on now to the Rangers, signing Marcus Simeon to a 7-year deal worth $175 million. That's $25 million per year, another Yankees target off the board. But I don't hate the Yankees not getting Simeon. I mean, Simeon was one of the fallback options. You knew Simeon would get overpaid. And I'm sorry, but Marcus Simeon is not worth $175 million. You knew he'd get it. You knew he'd get a big contract. The guy was an MVP finalist, made the All-Star team, won a Gold Glove, won a Silver Slugger, played in every game, hit .265 with 45 home runs and 102 RBIs. Had a fantastic year. The thing is, though, that's really the outlier. Simeon's never had a year like this before. You want to tell me 2019? It's comparable to 85 with 33 homers and 92 RBIs. But then if you're going in the past, look at what he did in 2018, 2017, 2016, etc., etc. You want to tell me Simeon's a late bloomer? He's coming into his own at the age of 28? Okay, it's possible. There are some players like that. But to give a guy like that $25 million per year for 7 years, that's risky. I mean, this move makes sense for the Rangers. They're looking to take the next step. I know there are some baseball insiders that really view them as a sleeper team. And they had a hole in the infield. You can move Isaiah Kiner for left at a third. Simeon takes over at short. There, done. But I'd be surprised if this really put the Rangers over the edge. You gotta think the Angels will be better with Mike Trout coming back and Perry Manassian spending on starting pitching. The Astros are still the Astros. The Mariners will be in the mix. The Athletics will fall off the face of the earth. But I'm not sold on the Rangers. I don't hate this move. I don't love it either. Moving on now to the Marlins, signing Avisail Garcia to a 4-year deal worth $53 million. That's just over $13 million per year. And I like this move for the Marlins. I like Garcia a lot. I've always liked him. Always thought he was underrated. I don't think the advanced metrics view him that highly because he doesn't get on base a lot. Last year he had just a .330 on base percentage, but he hit .262. He's a guy who will give you a solid average, double-digit home runs, about 70 RBIs per year. I like Garcia. There's a role for him on any team in the majors. And I've said this about the Marlins before. The Marlins are weird. Usually when you're a bad team, you have a solid offense, but terrible pitching. Case in point, the Rangers. The Marlins have it backwards. They actually have a really good pitching staff, but their lineup is garbage. To sign Garcia? To have him replace Marte? That's a good job by the Marlins. That's a good job by Jeter. I'll tell you right now, if the season started tomorrow, I'd say that the Marlins would be better than the Rangers. You want to talk about a sleeper team? I have more faith in the Marlins making a little bit of noise than the Rangers. Good job by the Marlins in finally spending some money. Moving on now to the Blue Jays, signing Kevin Gausman to a 5-year deal worth $110 million. That's $22 million per year. And this is an overpay. This is the typical guy hits free agency after a great year, so we have to give him a ton of money scenario. Kevin Gausman has never been anything close to a $20 million per year pitcher. Alright, I saw him a lot when he was with the Orioles. Had a really good year with the Giants. Went 14-6 with a 2.81 ERA. Made the All-Star team, got some Cy Young votes, got some MVP votes. Had a good year. You knew he'd get overpaid. This is Marcus Simeon. Now, I don't blame the Blue Jays for giving him this contract. Steven Matz is now a Cardinal. Robbie Ray is a free agent. The Blue Jays won 90 games last year. 91 to be specific. Their moment to win is now. That core that they have with Guerrero, Bichette, Biggio, Gurriel, etc., are still either on the come up or in the primes of their career. The AL East is wide open. I don't think anyone looks at the Rays and sees a world beater. I don't think anyone looks at the Red Sox and sees a world beater. No one looks at the Yankees and sees a world beater. The Blue Jays could win the AL East. Like, their moment is now. So signing Gausman fits. Again, it's not the end of the world. I know why the Blue Jays did it. I'm not going to begrudge them for this. I don't think this will be a great contract in the long run, but you got to strike while the iron's hot. So I can't blame the Blue Jays for that. Brought up the Rangers a little earlier. They weren't done in free agency. They signed John Gray to a 4-year deal worth $56 million. That's $14 million per year. And this is an absolutely terrible contract. This makes no sense whatsoever. John Gray is not good. John Gray went 8-12 last year with a 4.59 ERA. He has a couple good years to his name. In 17, he went 10-4 with a 3.67 ERA. In 19, he went 11-8 with a 3.84 ERA. But he does have an injury history. He's never pitched more than 173 innings. And last year, he went 8-12 with a 4.59 ERA. So let me get this straight. You'll give Simeon a big contract because of what he did last year. But John Gray, you'll give a big contract to because of what he did in 2019? That doesn't make any sense to me. You want to tell me those stats are inflated because he pitched in Coors Field? Fair point. Let's look at what he did on the road versus at home. At Coors Field, he went 31-18 with a 4.54 ERA. On the road, he went 22-31 with a 4.65 ERA. That's for his career. If I'm looking at just this past year, at Coors Field, he went 5-5 with a 4.02 ERA. On the road, 3-7 with a 5.22 ERA. Any way you slice it, John Gray is a worse pitcher on the road than he is in Denver. He's weird. He is a weird pitcher. But any way you slice it, he's not worth 14 mil per year. He's not worth 56 mil. Bad job by the Rangers. They're really not going to be that great next year. They're not making the playoffs. You want to tell me they'll be better than they were last year? Hallelujah, they'll finish with at least 61 wins. Yeah, Chris Woodward's the second coming of Ron Washington. Give me strength. I'll close this show out by eulogizing one of the best defensive players of all time. That is Curly Culp, who died on Saturday at the age of 75 from pancreatic cancer. You think about the best defensive players ever, you probably think about guys like Lawrence Taylor, Bruce Smith, Reggie White, Ray Lewis, Brian Urlacher, Aaron Donald, Deion Sanders. Curly Culp is in that mix. Curly Culp, from the late 60s to late 70s, absolutely dominated in football. I mean, usually guys dominate for just one team. Maybe they'll join another team and they'll be good, not great. Culp dominated for two teams, the Chiefs and the Oilers. And funnily enough, he wasn't even drafted by the Chiefs. No one knows this. He was drafted by the Denver Broncos. But even though he played defense at ASU and was an All-American in 1967, Frank Kush did a great job with him. The Broncos didn't want him to play on the D-line. So they tried him at offensive guard. It didn't work. Culp was picked in the second round. Just months later, he was traded for a fourth-round pick, which the Broncos used on Mike Schnitker. It is okay if you don't know who Mike Schnitker is. Mike Schnitker could deliver a pizza to any Broncos fan's house, and no one would look twice at him. Now, it took Culp a year to really hit his stride. But then in 1969, he dominated. He started every game. He had 8.5 sacks. He made his first Pro Bowl. And obviously the Chiefs that year beat the Jets in the divisional round. Thank you, Gloucester Richardson. They beat the Raiders in the AFL Championship. Then they beat the Vikings in the Super Bowl. All three teams that the Chiefs faced that year in the playoffs combined for just 20 points. You know why that was the case? Because the Chiefs' defense was fantastic. And Culp was a huge part of that. Mick Tingelhoff, one of the best centers in NFL history, was manhandled by Culp. So other guys on the Vikings O-line, guys like Jim Valone and Milt Sund, had to help Tingelhoff. So that freed up guys like Buck Buchanan and Willie Lanier to get to Joe Kapp, to get to Dave Osborne, to get to Bill Brown. It was a drubbing. I mean, Culp dominated for the Chiefs all throughout the early 70s. In 1971, he made his second Pro Bowl. That year, the Chiefs lost a really close playoff game to the Dolphins in the divisional round, 27-24. Garo Yepremian kicked a game-winning field goal in double overtime. Unfortunately, Culp's time with the Chiefs ended poorly. He was frustrated with his contract. Him and Hank Stram were at a huge impasse. So Stram traded Culp along with their first-round pick, which would turn into 6th overall. The Oilers would use that pick on Robert Brazil, who is a Hall of Famer. Had a fantastic peak in the mid-70s to early 80s. 7-time Pro Bowler. In exchange, the Chiefs got John Matizak and a third rounder. Matizak only played 2 years for the Chiefs. He found success with the Raiders. The third rounder turned into Henry Marshall, who had a solid career with the Chiefs, good wide receiver. But the Oilers got 2 defensive stalwarts pretty easily. Culp and Brazil for Matizak and Marshall? Yeah, the Oilers won that trade. I mean, Culp had an excellent run with the Oilers. Made the Pro Bowl every year from 1975 to 1978. In 75, he made his only All-Pro team by having 11.5 sacks. In 78, the Oilers made the AFC title game, but they got creamed by the Steelers, 34-5. The year after that, they matched up with the Steelers again in the AFC title game. The score was a little closer, 27-13, but the Steelers still won. He was incredibly strong. Without question, one of the strongest players to ever play in the NFL. He's in the Chiefs Hall of Fame. He went in 2008. You gotta wonder what took them so long. I understand they only do one inductee per year, but still, Culp should have gotten in before some of these guys that I'm looking at right now. Same thing with the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He got in 2013. Should have gone in a lot sooner. From the bottom of my heart, may he rest in peace. New York Islanders show comes your way tonight. If you thought this show was fiery, wait until you hear the Islanders show. Alright, I have 4 days of pent-up opinions to get out. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Hope you enjoyed your leftovers. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.